You may be seated. You know, I was thinking about that song, and I'm sure you've seen that same sight that Kenny talked about, where the rays of the sun are breaking through the clouds, just reminding us that God is always up there. You know, no matter how dark and cloudy. You know, the only thing, Kenny, is I don't think that song will really sell big in Oregon. Yeah, they probably don't understand the sun part. I had to explain to the visiting team that was here what that big yellow orb was up in the sky. They hadn't seen it before. It is a beautiful place to live and to be reminded of how God sheds His grace upon us and how blessed we are to be God's children, amen? And to be a part of this world that He shines on. I'm sorry our attendance is a little lower. There's a few empty seats here this morning. I made a terrible mistake. I have to admit it to you. That's why people aren't here this morning. I told everybody we were going to be in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22. You'll have to look up in the Bibles and you'll understand why some folks didn't come this morning. Actually, God has impressed upon my heart to change our schedule a little bit. We're going to have a little bit different sermon here this morning than that one. But you've got to promise me to keep it a secret that we are going to deal with that one the next week, okay? When they all come back thinking they missed that one, they'll be surprised. Just don't tell them, okay? We're going to be in 2 Chronicles chapter 24. 2 Chronicles chapter 24. I want to share with you a letter that was sent into the paper. Any of you remember Ann Landers? She had a column in the paper. I don't know if there's somebody carrying on with that or not. But it's an advice column. And people write in about things that are going on in their life and ask her advice for things. There's a letter from a woman that was married to a tightwad. She said her Aunt Emma was married to a tightwad who was a little strange. And he made a good salary, but he lived very frugally because he insisted on putting 20% of everything he made under the mattress. He didn't trust the banks, so he put it underneath the mattress. He said that money was going to come in handy in his old age. Well, unfortunately, old age came quicker than he thought. At 60, he was stricken with cancer. And toward the end, he made Aunt Em promise in the presence of his brothers that she would put the money he had stashed away in his coffin so he could buy his way into heaven if he had to. Well, they all knew that was a little odd, but it was clearly a crazy request, but he was a dying man, and so they did promise that they would do that. When he passed away, Aunt Em began to follow his orders. She took the money, about $26,000, to the bank and deposited it, then wrote a check and put it in the casket. Supposedly it's a true story, written to Ann Landers. Well, you know, you really can't take it with you, can you? But we are responsible for what we do with the blessings that God gives to us. The sun that He shines in our lives, we are responsible for doing with it something that will please God and will add to His kingdom. I want us to, as we think about our future as a church, and I believe God has a great future for this church, don't you? I believe He has a great future. I believe He wants us to impact this community for the cause of Christ. And I believe He wants the kingdom to grow because we've been here in this community, because His people have made a difference for Him. I believe that's God's purpose, right? But I think we need more than we needed the building remodeled, more than we need all these other things. We need to catch a vision of why we're here, of what we're about. We need to keep our eyes focused on exactly who God has called us to be as a church. I've been reading some books I enjoy reading at times, and I've been reading this book about the man who played God. It's a story about the Jews in Austria during the Second World War. And if you know anything about the Second World War, you know what happened to the Jewish race during that time. The Germans had a systematic plan of eliminating all the Jews of Europe. And they were seeking their best to do that. This book talks about that. Recently, we were watching on Netflix, my wife and I, a movie that I would advise you to watch. It's a little sobering, but it's a very good movie called Sarah's Key. And it's on that same topic about a young Jewish girl who locks her little brother in a closet when the authorities come to haul away their family to be eventually cremated, or eventually gassed and then cremated in a horrible death. And so she tries to save her brother. You'll want to see that movie for yourself. I don't want to give it away, but it really makes you think. What is the value of one single soul? How much does God love you? What is the value of a single soul? I want you to watch with me on this same theme a little bit of a clip of a movie that you may have seen called Schindler's List. It's about that same topic, and it's about a man trying to make a difference, one soul at a time. Schindler ran a munitions plant in occupied Europe. By use of his wealth and his money, he was able to save 1,100 Jews from certain death. They would have gone to a concentration camp where they would have been ushered into a shower and would have been gassed until they were dead, and then thrown into a pile or taken to a crematorium, and their bodies burned until they were just ashes, and then thrown away like refuse. To my knowledge, he is the only Gentile Protestant whose grave we saw at the Holocaust Museum. And yet his message was, I could have got one more. I could have saved one more. I interrupt our study in Ephesians to say to you, church, our purpose as a church is to save one more. One more. From a fate far worse than a man-made concentration camp, than a crematorium.